Okay, we're live. All right, Dave, great to see you today. We had chats earlier on this week. Thanks everyone for joining. Today we're talking about getting the hell yes with Dave Holland. Dave Holland is one of the leaders over at Balfour Restoration Management. Balfour is a restoration management company that works with multifamily. Dave's got a ton of experience in multifamily, both on the supplier side and the buyer side. So hoping to kind of dig in a little bit of that for the conversation. And for everyone here today, let's get to hell yes. So Dave, quick intro on yourself. How did you get into this industry? How did you get into this role?
All right. Hey, good afternoon, Keeler. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here. Like you mentioned, I am with Balfour Property Restoration. I've been in the multifamily world since 2016. Kind of like everyone else in multifamily, I just fell into it. Started with a property management company. I literally started on the bottom. I was on the maintenance team, and I did that for about 2 weeks until pretty much everybody decided I should not be on the maintenance team. And they moved me into the office, and I did a summer as a leasing agent, and then assistant manager, property manager, senior manager, and all the way up through the ranks. And then I switched to the supplier side. I said operations is lovely. It's great. It's not for me. There's a lot of stress, a lot of demand on your family, a lot of time on call. And I think I could just do a little better, more impact on the other side of the industry, being there to support the teams who are running the operation on the site. So I switched over to Balfour Restoration. I'm on the sales side of things, and my specialty is in multifamily and disaster planning for property management. I also do a lot of volunteering with IREM and with the NAA. So you'll see me at a lot of our chapter events and on the national level going to stuff all the time. Actually, just got back from a trip to Maryland yesterday where I was presenting for the IREM Maryland chapter about how to use ChatGPT. So I try to do a lot of volunteering back to the industry.
Yeah, you had time on the board at for New York and for the whole New York side of things at IRM, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So actually, the chapter president for the IRM New York region chapter, that was for 23 and 24. So my term is coming to the end at this calendar year. And I was on the board for Apartments of New York, which is the upstate New York chapter for NAA in 2020, 2021, 2022. And I've stayed involved since. And going into 25, I'll be the chair of the engagement committee for Apartments of New York. So yeah, very cool. Involved.
So you had a chance to hear both sides of the conversation, right? Like from this, like you were in the supplier committee at the New York side of things, right?
Correct. Yep. So I'm on both our local supplier committee and also National Supplier Council with NIA and Balfour as a national member.
What's that imply? Like just first, and before we kind of kick things off, what's the supplier council imply? Is that working with what's success look like in that role?
So NAA, National Apartment Association, suppliers can join the National Supplier Council for whatever cost it is. I think when we joined, it was $1,700 or something like that. And you get some perks, you get some benefits. You get to pick your booth early for Apartmentalize. You get access to the Apartmentalize attendee list. But beyond that, you get to be part of the directory and you get the badge of saying, look, I am a supplier council member, and everyone can trust that the company is verified. And, it's basically NAA stands by and says, yep, these guys are good and they're ethical. And we support you doing business with them.
Very cool. That's a good help. That's a good lift for qualifying the vendors with respect to what they're trying to achieve, right?
Absolutely.
But tell me about in Balfour and maybe in previous experiences, like who's your ideal buyer right now in multifamily?
All right, so let's do a quick recap on Balfour for some who don't know, and that's perfectly okay. Great Balfour is property restoration. So if you have a fire, if you have a flood, if you have mold, water damage, if there's a hoarder, the unit needs to get cleaned out. And even if there's more technically complex things, if you need document recovery, if you have technology that has gotten waterlogged or needs to be recovered, even all the way down to restoring the historic buildings or the library in Alexandria, right? Anything modern building to historic building that needs some kind of restoration from catastrophe or just build up of trash or what have you, Balfour is specialized. They have the technology, the tools, the people to be able to go in and complete that job to the correct standards the first time, right? Without having to go back. So everyone in at least my office has a specialty into what they kind of do. I'm talking on the sales side of things now. So me coming out of the world of property management, I'm specializing into apartments and multifamily and that kind of realm of the world of people who could need restoration. Whereas there's someone else in my office, Peter, who has been he was a facilities manager in a school district for 37 years. So his specialty is schools. He knows everything about that industry, and they do what they can to partner up people who know a lot about the industry and the people, the network, so that they can correctly diagnose and attend to issues that come up. So Belfour can handle it all, and then they specialize into specific areas. My ideal buyer is a apartment community, a property manager, somebody who, they know what they're doing, and they know that when it's time to call in a specialist, they're calling in a specialist, right? They're not asking their maintenance technician to do the plumbing, to do the electrical work. They're not asking that person to do the disaster response. They're calling a specialist, and you're to be the specialist.
So in that world, I mean, they're in a position of crisis, right? If I understand, I'm thinking of damage and restoration.
Yeah.
So they're going to go and they've got to act quickly. So how do they decide? Like, they're in a moment of crisis, which means they're incentive for change. They've got to do something different. How are they choosing? Yep. Like, what's their choice? Are they choosing based on the first person there? Is it price? Is it quality? What's the buyer thinking about as they're thinking about choosing a restoration company?
There's a lot of factors, and you just named a whole bunch of them, right? So if you have the best scenario is if you already have a prior relationship with a restoration company, right? So before there's ever any kind of a fire, before any kind of a water damage, that restoration company has walked your property, they've got the documents, they have the correct phone numbers, they know who the insurance company is, and that way in the event of a loss, which we all hope doesn't happen, but in the event of a loss, things can just start getting responded to, right? You can call the correct insurance broker, the adjuster, you can get the proper response team on site, you can have the phone number for the property manager or the decision maker, right? So ideally, if you're in property management, reach out to some restoration company around you, ideally Belfour, and say, hey, let's start up a relationship. What can you do for me as far as documentation, as far as disaster planning? How can you help me be prepared so that when there's a problem, I'm not having to make 1,000 decisions and deal with vendors who are knocking on my door, right? But let's say you didn't do that. Let's say you had a fire, you have no prior relationship with it. What's that?
Yeah.
So you don't have any kind of prior relationship
keep
with a restoration company. You're going to get the ambulance chasers showing up to your property. Oh, I saw on the news. Oh, I saw the firefighter dispatch call go out. You had a fire, you had a flood, whatever it is. Here's my card, right? And everyone wants to be first to respond because generally someone in a moment of crisis is like, yep, here, just go. Give me your information and go. Go solve my problems, go board up the building, whatever needs to happen, right? But that person, you're going to be in a lot of stress, and they might be selling you or overselling you or promising, and you don't want to get lied to or duped. You want to make sure that whatever the response is in line with what your insurance coverage is, because if your insurance covers $100,000 worth of damage and they sell you 150, somebody has to pay that 50, and all of a sudden your crisis number one becomes crisis number one and number two because you've blown your budget. So it's better to have the relationship already established so you know what the insurance limits are, and when there is an issue, it's all pre-scripted as how to respond to it.
Do you guys ever get into the consultative part of it around damage prevention?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to program called Alert. It's actually a free program, and we'll come through and do a documentation of the buildings and the systems and the shut-offs and the emergency contacts and the insurance and the carrier and the adjuster and all of the details we can get, correct beforehand. And then we give your team and the site staff an app. It's the Red Alert app, and all of that data lives right there, and anyone on your team can access it when they need it. And they can write through the app, say, having an emergency, I need a response, and Belfour goes out and responds. And if somebody needs some help doing some disaster planning, that's where my specialty is. I have received PM. I have years of experience in property management. I'm more than happy to jump on a phone call, or if you're local to me, come walk a site, or I can send someone from your local office out there, say, hey, have you thought about this? And what are you doing about that? And when was the last time this was inspected? And help you get all those details together when there's not a time crunch, so that when you have an issue, God forbid, hopefully you don't, but if you have an issue, you're ready for it.
Do you tend to sell mostly to the owner operators or owners or the operators, the owners? Like who's your principal kind of archetype?
I would say it's property managers, usually third-party property managers or owner operators.
Yeah.
Generally, the owner hiring a third-party manager, they want to know that this person's got everything under control and there's disaster plans and they're all ready to go, and they don't want to deal with it. That's why they hired a manager. So generally, I'm working with property management companies.
So is there an annual compliance thing they need to achieve? They need to adhere to start thinking about like contacting and contracting that kind of service, or is it? Because I mean, coming into the conversation, I was fully expecting it's strictly kind of a response-driven market activity, and then you're kind of like first to market and et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm hearing here is a consultative approach to damage prevention, and then ultimately being there when there's an incident that occurs. How does that?
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. So how does that buyer start seeking a solution? Like, what are they trying to solve at that point?
Well, you have to think about what's going on all day long for a property management person, right? Are they so busy with everything that's happening on site and people showing up and vendors and walk-ins and move-ins and move-outs that they can't plan for the future? Or do they have everything under control and it's all going according to plan, and they have an assistant manager that handles renewals and that handles the applications, and the manager can focus on, preparedness or disaster planning or budgeting or forecasting or some kind of working on the business to ensure its success in the future. So generally, the people that are way too busy with everything going on and they're always putting out fires are going to be the ones that don't have some kind of a relationship. They haven't done the pre-planning, and when there's a crisis, they have to drop everything and go deal with the crisis. Versus the people that have a good control on what's going on and the people to plan. And if should there be a crisis, it's all scripted as to what happens next and who does what and what goes where and the correct vendors to call. And we're already in the system as an approved vendor with the W-9 COI and all that data.
In this era of like compressed NOI, like when people are kind of like they're trying to prioritize where they're spending things on the expense side of things.
Correct.
How do you manage to make restoration, I'll say consultative services, a priority at the operator level?
So about 90% of what Belfour does is paid for by insurance claims, right? The last 10%,
Right.
the self-pay, is going to be stuff that you just can't claim on insurance, right? Say you have a hoarder or you have something that happens that insurance, like, yeah, no, we just not cover that, right? So if you're talking about return on investment, you need to know, or return on spending, you need to know what your insurance covers and how much it covers. And you don't want to get into a situation where you're overspending because you're like, just go fix the problem without doing any work in advance to say, but keep it under this dollar amount, or here's my insurance agent, or making sure that the vendor and the insurance company play nicely together and that they're not fighting, because the longer that process goes on, the less likely is the claim gets paid or your rates go up or something like that.
So then in that period where there's that, I mean, obviously, so do insurance companies pay for the consultative piece, like the getting ready for the event piece?
Not necessarily. Generally, that's something that I will or other Belfour operators will just go out and do as a courtesy, right? Plus, it's another way to differentiate us from a different restoration company, because maybe they are, maybe they're not doing that, but it's about relationships, right? It's all about, when I have a fire, I want them to think, oh, let me call David, rather than I don't know who to call and I'll just call the first person who shows up to the site.
Sure. Okay, so then if I understand correctly, the business model is such that you guys provide value early and often, right, prior to an event. That's part of the go-to-market motion, right, of giving value early. You guys help them organize all their stuff and prepare for an emergency. They've got an app that a way to contact you guys so that when something does happen, and presumably inevitably things do happen, right? Like especially like in the mold sort of things, like that's inevitable, right? And I mean, I imagine your business in like climate regions is fairly repetitive, and so like that's going to happen. So I'm curious as to like if I'm a busy property manager, and there's no end of things for me to do. This is kind of getting to the hell yes conversation. There's no end of things for me to prioritize, and where to put my time. What am I thinking about, or why am I thinking about getting your team in to start doing all this stuff for me? Like, is it what's happening in my life as a property manager that I'm going to say, okay, I'm fully booked all 40 hours this week.
Correct.
But I'm going to allocate 2 hours of my time to Belfour to get set up in this space in case something happens. Like, the part that I'm trying to unpack is like sales that occur on in case moments. It's a different kind of sell, right? And especially if you kind of get to the hell yes conversation.
So if your 40 hours, you're already packed, you can't fit any more in your schedule, let me come in and take some of that off of your plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I can come in and say, hey, I'm going to walk all your sites and we'll put up the stickers and we'll say, let's take care of your disaster planning. And then when when it's time to do your sprinkler inspection, your fire extinguisher, your fire hydrant, flushing or whatever, I'll just reach out to you and remind you. That way it can be all in the schedule rather than waiting and then forgetting and then having to pay more money because you never flush the hydrants when the hydrants stop working and the fire department shows up and just puts it back. So let me, help you, because property managers are generalists. They have to do so many things and wear so many hats. Your vendors, your supplier partners are the specialists. Let them come in and do what they do best and take a little bit of the load off of your plate.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that's unique for you guys, like with respect to going to market?
I think it's unique for the multifamily industry. And I think that there's some people that are afraid for their job and I can do it all and I'll put in 60 hours and I can handle everything. And there's some people that say, look at this, look at all my supplier partners and they're willing and able to help. And I'm confident and secure in my position. And I'm going to say, you handle this. I can trust you with it. I know that it's going to get handled correctly. I think it's a multifamily thing.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'm just trying to think of like the property manager's mindset, right? As they're kind of going through this and choosing, like when they're sitting out. So then ultimately the problem that you initially solve is really around preparedness.
Correct.
And
preparedness and response, right? If someone doesn't have preparedness, then you have to talk about response.
Yeah, and I gather like if I don't have preparedness in place as a property manager, then and something a catastrophe happens, then I'm hitting Google, and that you're kind of foolish. And that if you're just if a fire hits and you're hitting Google or you're looking for restoration on mold or whatever, you're not looking like you're kind of running a tight ship. And so like,
correct.
Just in terms of like the buyer's journey, right? Like when they're going through that stage of like discovery and exploring alternatives, what are the problem they're trying to solve at that point in time? Sounds like preparedness. And they want to have like a emergency response plan kind of ready to go. And like that's not a compliance issue in multifamily. So there's no insurance company that says, do you have an ERP? Right? It's not. It's not what they might. And if they do, then you've got to have that.
Right.
Not every time. So that happens sometimes. Okay. So then the pitch is, let me solve your preparedness issue, and you're ready to go if and when something does happen. And here's the actuarial rate of something actually happening. So in your duration as a property manager, there's a high probability that something is going to happen. And here's the things that we solve. And so what are they going to consider at that point in time? Like, are they going to sit there and go, okay, well, Belfour is looking at doing this for us. I'm going to look at 1, 2, 3, or I'm going to do it myself, or I'll hire somebody. Like, what are the things that they consider before they go, okay, I'm going to bring in a third party to do this so that we're prepared?
So one of the things is your capacity to do whatever the thing that needs to be done is, right? Do you have the staff? If you have the staff, are they already too stressed or too overwhelmed, maybe with work orders or turnovers, then they can't pause that schedule to go and respond to a water issue or a fire issue, right? The second question would be, do you have the time, right? Because a lot of these things are very time sensitive. The longer that water sits, the more likely is that you're going to have mold. And if you can't get somebody there in the middle of the night or over the weekend, or that you don't have the staff to respond to a water leak within 24 hours, absolutely you should be calling in help before the problem gets worse, right? And when it comes to fire issues, the every day that one of your residents is displaced, it's additional cost. Maybe they're in a hotel or whatever issue, but they're not in their apartment. So you're going to have to credit it back to them, or so there's some vacancy cost to that. So the longer you drag your feet on calling someone or making a decision or getting a problem solved, it could lead to more cost and more issues with
then
issue.
really,
And Belfour does it. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Belfour does more than just fires and floods, right? So we also help with hoarders, right? I can tell a story that happened just last week. We had a apartment community down the road from our office, 2-bedroom unit where the resident had passed away, and they had been a hoarder. The apartment was waist deep with trash, and there was just a wall of used adult diapers. And the property, the apartment needed to be cleaned, cleared out, and sanitized just so the maintenance team could get in there and prepare it for the next renter. And the next renter had already rented the unit. They were scheduled to come in December 1st. So time was crucial. The resident had passed over Labor Day weekend, and the family didn't give the management company permission to enter the unit until 2 months later. So it had been sitting there for 2 months, and everything, just think about the neighbors dealing with that smell and everything going on.
Yeah.
So we were competing with another restoration company to get the job, and we ended up matching their price, but we won the job because we were able to deliver on timing. With less than 24 hours notice, we were able to mobilize the team and say, we can be there tomorrow morning and we will get the whole job done in one day and everything turned back over to you. And then, hey, over the weekend, we're going to leave our air scrubbers in the unit. We'll pick them up on Monday. And that way, not only is it clean, empty, and sanitized, the air is also clean, the smell is gone. And since we can do it tomorrow, that's one click better than their competing vendor who could do it for the same price but couldn't get there until next week. So, for sellers.
So there's kind of almost two conversion events. There's almost two conversion events, right? If I hear you correctly, there's a conversion event on the preparedness piece, and there's a conversion event on the catastrophe piece. And if you've got the conversion event locked in on the preparedness piece, you're probably, it's very unlikely that I, as a property manager, are going to choose somebody different. So those are kind of like locked in, and in the eventuality of a catastrophe. But then you kind of talk about the other events. Okay, what's the other one? What's the third one?
So before the event is preparedness, after the event is response or remediation, and then there's reconstruction. And remediation and reconstruction are two different things in the eyes of insurance, but Belfour can do both. And you have to bid the jobs and treat the jobs separately. So basically, the remediation is the interview to see if Belfour will get the job for the reconstruction. So it's, if you're not happy with how the walls are torn out, why would you hire the same vendor to put the walls back in?
And then with the insurance companies, like, is there a preferred list kind of like scenario with insurance companies that you're shortlisted when they're in the event of a catastrophe?
So one of the avenues for me to find referrals is to talk to State Farm, and Allstate, and every insurance company out there, because what do they deal with all day long? People who are having a catastrophe, and they say, well, who do I call? What do I do? Right? And they give them their list of 3 or 4 names, and I want to be on that list.
Right. So there's kind of a fourth conversion event where you've got to get the insurance company to prove you the list. Because the way I'm thinking about this with respect to, like, hell yes, I'm going to choose Belfour for all 3 of the events, right? Preparedness, like, as a partner, right? For the preparedness piece, for the eventuality of a catastrophe, and the restoration of the reconstruction. Like, those 3 events, you don't want those to go into competitive scenarios, because that's where you start just competing on price, and that's what you want to avoid. Because ultimately, given that everything is response related, you are paying a higher premium for talent, equipment, etc. Right?
Timing, right? Because if it's 2 in the morning, it's much more expensive than 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah. So then, like, when someone is talking about those 3 events, how do you get in front of those so that they're thinking about Belfour specifically? Like there's given the conversion event preparedness, there's a conversation. If I'm hearing you correctly, there's a conversation that kind of leads that from what's a good fit, what's a good site, what do you want to, where do you want to, where do you play well, where do you have people, right? Where do you have teams? where you have franchises in place. And then there's the conversion event on a catastrophe. And there, I mean, what does the buyer do in that case? Are they just kidding Google, or they contact the insurance company and figure out who to work with? Who's their first call?
Could be one. Usually it's 911, right? That's the first call.
Sure. Right.
Second call would then be the insurance company to report the loss and to get assigned an adjuster. And if they're not already working with a disaster restoration company, the insurance company would say, hey, here's 3 or 4 people we work companies that we work with, we trust, reach out to one of them. But at the same time, that fire is going to be on the news, right? The fire department got dispatched, the information's out there. And so you probably have restoration companies writing towards you as fast as possible to be the first one to hand you their business card.
Sure. So how do you compete in that scenario? How do you get the hell yes for Belfour in that scenario?
So that one's really tricky, right? Because a lot of the time it really just is whoever gets there first. If you show up fire with a case of water and a coffee for the person who's running the show, that might be it. That'll get you the job, Whereas the way to, in my opinion, is to already have the relationship, already have the disaster response, set and scheduled and planned. And that way, when the event happens and the manager gets that phone call that there's a fire, there's an issue, the only thing they think is, we got to call Belfour or whatever, whoever rep is.
What kind of, it's a unique situation. Like I've kind of often said that nobody negotiates the fireman, but in this case, it sounds like people do a little bit, right? Like when it comes to crisis for restoration. So do they go, and what kind of objections do you get? Is it strictly on, what objections do you typically get?
So some objections are, hey, I already have a relationship with a restoration company, right? And another objection is, I think I should bring in a public adjuster, right? So public adjusters, the way that they work is they go and they battle with your insurance company. So the insurance company says, we're going to pay you $100,000 for this claim. And the public adjuster says, what are you talking about? There's this, there's that, there's this coverage, and the documents that are paid for. You need to go off and pay $300,000 for this claim. And the way the public adjuster gets paid is they take a slice of the differential between what they were going to pay and what they actually paid. So if it's a $200,000 differential, 2%, that's the money for the public adjuster, right? So when one of the objections is, oh, I think I should bring in a public adjuster, my response is, you don't need to, right? For public adjusters, it's a misconception that they're always necessary. At Belfour, we handle the same insurance process and work to maximize the claim amount directly with the insurer. The difference is that the public adjuster takes a commission, whereas Belfour doesn't, and that goes towards the restoration of the project. So if you want every dollar available, know who you're working with. The more hands in the pot, takes away from every dollar available to restore the property. We also work with some of the utility providers. So like National Grid is the utility in New York where we are, and they have a program where, on the back of the bill, everyone pays like a 2-cent fee per month, and that adds up to millions of dollars. And they have different companies that go out and they give away that money. So energy efficiency upgrades, lighting upgrades, and pipe wraps, and all these programs and incentives from National Grid. And if you were to call Belfour and you had a fire and it knocked out all of your LED lighting or all of your incandescent lighting all at one shot, when we come in and do the work, we'll call in those utility rebate companies and get National Grid to pay for the $80,000 worth of lighting. And that way we can continue to commit that 80 grand, where instead of spending it on light bulbs, we can continue to restore the property in other ways and make the money go further.
So a couple questions. So actually 3 questions here. Is who cares about that? Does the operator care about that, or does the owner care about that?
Probably both, I would say, because ultimately the operator has a fiduciary responsibility to the owner. And if I'm the owner of the building, and you have an insurance policy that covers up to X dollars, and you have a loss that's going to be 2X, right? Any way that you can stretch your coverage dollars to restore without having to go into your own pocket is better.
So then, and then the second question was, do you market how much of a headache that is? Do you market that as the pain that you're resolving for that property management? Here's what you think a fire looks like. It looks like I call the insurance company and I call this. Or is it, here's what a fire really looks like to you as a property manager, and here is the things that you have to do. Is that, and do they even understand that? Like, I mean, I wouldn't have understood until they had this conversation.
So we try to do a lot of education. We try to do a lot of webinars, joining local associations, IREM, NAA, BOMA, all of the property management associations try to be part of. And it's, putting out that education. It's doing that disaster planning consultation. It's making sure that you know what you're getting into, or the impacts of what could happen when this happens.
Mm-hmm. And then the third question is like, is this a building by building game, or do you go for like the larger operators so you can get kind of preferred? I don't say preferred, but just like if you get an operator that's got 85 buildings and that's going to give me these 85 buildings, or is it a hand-to-hand combat?
It's a little bit of both. So let me explain. So if you have a property management company that has 10,000 units and they're spread across 70 buildings, right? You have to first sell either one of the buildings or the whole management company to be an approved vendor, right? So I get on your approved list, and here's my documentation, I'm in your system and everything. And then once you have your foot in the door, you can either take the approach of, we will cover all of your sites, and when you have a problem in any of them, please call us. Or you can go building by building and say, hey, at this building, here's where the sprinklers are, here's where the shutoffs are, here's where everything is, and here's the specific response plan for this building. So when there's an issue, you pull out the document or the app or whatever, and here's your, and that's laborious, right? Because instead of making one phone call to a regional manager, I have to now talk to 70 property managers. But I would actually rather do the 70 property managers, because now that 70 people that they all know who to call, versus if the regional manager's on vacation at the time of the fire, the property manager might just go with whoever gets there first, even though the company had a prior relationship with me through the regional manager.
Like, I would think as a regional manager, like the roll up of that preparedness would become a real pain point for me. Like I would just use an RM, 80 buildings, right? You got having that roll up of the preparedness piece, and then there is no, then your property manager roles, there's a higher turnover rate there, right? And so if you can just say, okay, this is the choice. This is the choice at the RM level. You use Belfour, period. There's no other phone call to make. Here's the QR, whatever, right? Here's the app using QR code. Like, so in terms of like, I'm just trying to think of the buyer, right?
So what I like to do, because you're right, there is a lot of turnover in property managers. I use ALN data, which if you're not using, you absolutely should on the seller side. But they have a change report where you can see as employees turn over or property management companies change or what have you, you can get that report and see who's changing and the new name and the new contact information. And so if I have like a management company where I've worked with them before, the employee before, and then something changes over, I get that information from ALN data. I reach out to them and say, hey, I'm with Belfour. We work with your property. We handle your disaster documentation. I'm going to come down there, how's Tuesday, and we'll walk your site together, and I'll show you, here's this and here's that, and when there's a problem, here's who you call. So we're coming in not as we're going to sell you something, but as a training partner to make sure that your staff is ready, prepared, should there be an issue, they know who to call.
Well, because presumably Belfour is around longer than the property manager, right?
Yes, Belfour is humongous. Right? Yep.
Well, no, it's just like the mitigation of like what happens in an emergency. Like just I've done a lot of emergency work in my life, and it's like
could be years.
What happens in an emergency is it's frantic, right? And people are fumbling for binders and googling stuff and making decisions they shouldn't make, and and that playbook in terms of what to do in an emergency isn't something you touch every single day. So like,
correct.
If I was an RM, and I'm just trying to think, like the preparedness piece is something that would be like an RM likes to de-risk, right? So if I can de-risk calamity, then I'm a buyer for that. At the property manager level, if there's an event, then I'm just going to respond. I'm not really being strategic about it. So I'm curious if you guys position that preparedness piece as a strategic de-risking kind of like program at the RM level. Because like if I'm an RM, that's a hell yes for me, right? you're going to do this for free.
Yep.
I've got 80 buildings. It's budget season. I'm losing my mind. Something's going to go wrong this year in one of them for sure. And I've got 40% turnover on a property manager level. So I can't really rely on the property managers to know what to do. They've got to have a playbook.
Yep.
So that's what I'm kind of hearing from you right there is the RM level. There's a de-risking play that is costless. Yep. And then all you do is you capture all the business. I imagine it's higher, it's costless. So there's no margin in that, but you're part of the program. Then when there is an event in one of those 80 buildings, you're the red button.
So not only is everything you just said correct, one of the other benefits of the Red Alert program is should there be a catastrophe, a hurricane comes through, a landslide, a flood, countywide, citywide, a tornado hits, everybody's knocked out. If you're part of the Red Alert program, which we already discussed is free, you jump the line into a response, and I will come to your site first compared to everyone else who's calling me the first time.
So then is your ideal buyer, is the ideal transaction to an RM, the preparedness program? So you convert that RM, you get the portfolio business, and then everything else just takes care of itself.
Yes. Yes, because guaranteed when I come onto your site to say, hey, let's prepare for a big event, right? If the whole city gets knocked out by a tornado, at the same time, you're going to say, hey, while you're here, would you come look at this unit that I need some help turning over? Or would you look at that I need, that's got a hoarder, I need you to clean it out. And I can pick off those little jobs, easy peasy, because I'm there, because I showed up and I said, I want to get you into this free program. But by the way, while I'm already here, we do this, we do that, and we do this. You got any mold? How can I help?
I'm curious, what was the industry's reaction to Tampa, right? To the hurricanes that hit Tampa area? When you go with the Red Alert program, I don't know this for a fact. Was there a lot of extortion type pricing in that scenario? It feels rhetorical, but was it?
I understand where you're thinking about, where you're coming from, but no, they're absolutely not. So and
not just Belfort, but industry wide. If I've got a blower,
Yep. So there's industry set standards and guides, and everyone has to work off of rate sheets and exact dollars. This costs this amount, and
interesting.
It's all pre-scripted industry wide, so that nobody can price gouge. Right?
There's no surge pricing.
Correct. It's all pre-scripted. The thing that you'll see where there's price gouging is if you have an operator where they say, oh, we need 8 guys, but they only bring in 6 and they bill for 8. And that's where you're looking for your ethical operators to make sure you're not getting screwed over.
Okay. So then in the event like the Tampa event, right, which is, it started to feel to be somewhat repeatable, predictable. If you're in a Red Alert program, you've got fixed rates, and then you see the hurricane approaching. Is there conversations that are happening even before that the hurricane occurs? If I don't have Belfour,
so let's do it twice. So I have my existing clients, my book of business. I'll be reaching out to them and saying, hey, there's a hurricane on the horizon. Make sure you're implementing part A, B, and C of your plan. And you got your write out teams in place. And when there's an issue, here's the phone number, and make sure it's all up to date. Make sure your insurance is paid, because that's always a concern just at the last second there, right? And then you have everybody in the world who's not already having a relationship with Belfour, and they're going to call the general number, they call the emergency line, and Belfour's going to do everything in its power to respond. But in a Tampa level event where you have back-to-back hurricanes and the whole town is wiped out, people that have the prior relationship, they're part of the Red Alert program, they have their ducks in a row, are going to get the first response, and they're going to get better service. Not saying that people that don't already have it aren't going to get great service. They are, but it might take a little time to get there because of the catastrophe level event.
So then, given that prices are fixed in the time of a let's say mass catastrophe, are they fixed in terms of when it's an isolated catastrophe? If it's a fire, those are also fixed?
Absolutely. It's actually the same price list. The only difference is catastrophe fee. It's actually 6% that gets added when it's a catastrophe level event. Same price list, whether it's a single fire or the whole town's on fire.
So then to drive profitability, it's a volume game, right? It's a volume game. Price times quantity, All right. So
Well,
then
the price
if
list
you've
is
got a,
based off of what the insurance company is willing to pay.
okay. So then if I'm thinking about hell yes for your buyers,
Yep.
they really are, especially in areas where there's recurring disasters. I mean, you've got those, that's got to be a hot spot for restoration. I'm just going off convention, right? And then you've got the ones that are kind of one-offs, like, like whatever, a building in Boston versus a building in Tampa. Like, presumably there's a different urgency to that relationship. Like if I'm a building manager in Boston, I could punt on the preparedness thing because it's probably not going to happen in my shift. It's kind of like the mentality, right? Or at least I'm not going to deal with it this week. But if I'm a property manager or regional manager in Tampa, Florida, or on the Gulf Coast, or maybe in California during wildfire season, I'm seriously thinking about this as like, this is something I do every single year. Like I want to submit my preparedness plan by, if I'm in hurricane season, by June, if I'm in forest fire season by January. So then I'm actually demonstrating to my leadership that we've got a plan for something that happens on the regular, right?
Correct. And well, even, just to counter what you said, if you're not in a hurricane or a wildfire area, fires still happen. Dishwasher supply lines still break, right?
Sure.
It's not like you're not going to have an emergency because you don't live in the emergency area. It'll happen. It might not happen as predictably, but nobody plans to have a fire on Tuesday. It just happens.
Oh yeah, totally. But I'm trying to, what I'm trying to understand, and not just specifically your business, but like this is whole like why people do things, right? And like why do people opt for change? Like why do people, why would someone in Boston make that a priority in their 40-day work week versus someone in Tampa or like, the California area? Because like, and that's kind of like what I'm trying to get around this, getting to hell yes. It's like either they have a pain that is so severe and a time wall, right?
Yep.
And that time wall is what prompts them to act for change. And so like the time wall of weather related events is pretty hard to ignore. Much, versus I'll say that in the Northeast, it'd be weather, right? Winter comes every year. And so that time wall is something that could be contributing to a hell yes conversation. Like, hey, are you ready? I'll keep using the hurricane example. It's fresh, but like that time wall of hurricane season prompts people to change and commit to prioritization versus something that may happen but doesn't normally happen, right? I mean, people have, they've got dead batteries in their fire
Detectors.
Fire systems, fire checkers, all over the place. People don't have carbon monoxide sensors in the house because those just things that just might happen. They should, and it's like $49, but it's like, it's just like I'm trying to understand. This is in not just this conversation, but in all conversations. Like what I'm trying to sense is that what creates change, what creates prioritization, what's being blocked, right? Like, and that I need to unblock. And so like when you look at your business, because you have a national portfolio, do you pick and choose like known time walls to activate your go-to-market?
So essentially you're always going to market, right? One of the things that I like to do is, you had a fire at property A, right? They had an issue, whether they were prepared or not for it. Every neighboring property within 5-10 miles is going to hear about it and they're going to say, oh my God, thank goodness that wasn't me, right? So they're already thinking about, it could have been me. And if I call them the day after that property had a fire and say, oh my gosh, did you hear these guys? They had a fire and they need to relocate some of their residents and I'm just trying to help them out. Do you have any available units? I can send the information over. And by the way, are you ready just in case you have some kind of an issue, right? And on a large enough scale across the state, across the country, you could do those phone calls all day long.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about knowing what's going on and then knowing who is the nearest by competitor and how to get a hold of them. And then you build the relationship, and you build and you build and you build. And eventually somebody in your book of business has a problem, and you go. And then you call all of their neighbors. And you say, we were there. We were helping them out and wanted to make sure that you were ready and we were able to help you should you ever have a problem. Oh, I think I lost you here.
Just lost it. Sorry, my internet but up there. This is the fun part
That's
of
okay.
being live.
I got you.
I heard you loud and clear. Like you can make those calls all day long for the regular preventative maintenance. It's the event-driven time wall maintenance that's
Since you don't know when the next event is going to be, right? You have to always be ready for an event. Nobody plans, like I said, nobody plans to have a fire on Tuesday. So you have to always be ready for it. And by calling and highlighting that your neighbor had an issue, it puts the fear and the doubt into say, oh my gosh, that could have been me. Am I ready?
Yep. Because then it's part of their priority list. Now it's top of mind.
Yeah, it's become top of mind.
I got you. Right, I got you. So that can prompt the relatedness, and that's a total human response, right? Like if there's someone that I know that it happened to, and I know the hell they went through,
it becomes more real.
I'm prompted to kind of, you got it, more real. So those narratives around people that they know become valuable when you're trying to in less of a time wall situation, because then you're kind of creating that convention around, okay, this is not this. I want to mitigate this.
Yep. Another thing that I do is, if that same property A, they had a fire on November 1st or something, I'll wait 30 days. Like say they went with another restoration company, I'll wait 30, 60 days, and then I'll call them and say, hey, you guys had a fire a month, 2 months ago. You went with quick response or Serve Pro or Blue Team or whoever. How did it go? What do you feel like they serviced your needs? What happened afterwards? Are you still dealing with insurance issues? Or do you feel sufficiently protected for next time? And if they say, yeah, we're all good, I say, great, I'm so happy to hear that. And that's that. But some percentage of the time they'll say, oh man, they did this and they did that and I didn't like it. And then that gives me an opportunity to say, we do it a little bit differently. Let me help you prepare in case it happens again.
And I like that from a Hell Yes perspective, because they've already experienced the trauma. They want to prevent it from happening again. And so like a Hell Yes customer for you might be somebody who's already had a bad experience, and you give it some time for the trauma to subside, but ultimately you don't want to give it too much time. So an external signal for you might be, was there a nearby catastrophe that you can activate on for a conversation? Because then, because kind of with respect to kind of closing this out from a Hell Yes perspective, a buyer for you, that I'll scenario this. A scenario where a buyer is a, let's say the property manager level, who's not their property, luckily for them, but a neighboring property had a catastrophe, and maybe their colleagues or whatever, and you dig in on that and you say, hey, just so you know, et cetera, here's what, I'm sure you've heard, and you tell the story, and then it can be, a colloquialism. It doesn't need to be like testimonial in terms of what happened. And then would you consider this? And then that becomes an event that I want to actually activate, right? That can be something that I want to do something about.
Yep.
Okay. This is starting to make sense for me. So you're Hell Yes, and that buyer's like, Hell yes.
Hell yes, I need to be prepared, right? And at that moment, I'm not selling them anything. I'm not making any dollars. I'm just setting myself up so that when they have an issue, I'm the phone call. And who knows?
And that's
you have an issue later that week. You don't know.
Yeah, because in your conversation, or maybe even if there's an RM, then so the second buyer, like the RM buyer, the RM, if they had a fire in one of their units, they had to deal with, they're going to be Hell yes.
Correct. And while I'm talking to them about a big thing, I can also pick off the little jobs and say, hey, let me help you with this little thing, or help turn over that unit, or we do this, or do you know about mold or whatever? And I could just beat that drum and turn that flywheel and do enough little jobs that they're consistently happy with, that when something big hits, it's time to go. Hell yes.
Yeah, I totally got it now. This is super helpful. This is super interesting. So then when you take a look at that piece of advice for other people out there, from your buyers and from your sellers' experience, what are you looking for from Hell Yes?
What am I looking for? I'm looking for them to stay. So I would say, basically, we agree. You're the vendor we want to work with. We have an agreement in place. We're part of the Red Alert program or something, and you're our people. So that when there's a problem, you're our people. We're designated. We're go to, and we're not going to waste 2, 3, 4 days comparing quotes and dealing with this and dealing with it. It's just go. It's just our insurance. Go solve the problem and restore the property and put everyone back where they should be.
When there is a problem at the property management level, does it roll up to the regional manager? Like,
yes,
if you say you got a 50%, given the turnover in property management, so it rolls up to the RM, so it becomes the RM's headache, and that's a Sunday afternoon headache. That's something that I don't want to deal with.
Depending upon the size of the company, that could be the property manager, the regional manager, the director of operations, and the owner, all on the site, because it's a big enough event happening that everybody needs to be there to respond to it.
Mm-hmm. And the PM is probably going to do just what they feel is natural, because there's an absence. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
and someone's going to say, "Hey, property manager, you just go tell everyone to stand back. We're taking over this crowd, and we're taking over this scene."
100%.
Or what have you. Yep.
Yeah, like in an emergency, you don't want people improvising.
No, you want it pre-scripted,
right?
Who's doing what, and you want one person calling the shots, and they're making the decisions. You can't have 3, 4 people giving conflicting direction. You can't.
Well, when you think about it, like a building's worth $100 million, right?
Yeah.
And catastrophes can have a major compounding impact on the rest of the asset. And you've got somebody who's junior in the role in almost every case, who's effectively accountable for mitigating this $100 million asset. Like, that's risky to me. Like, you've got, like, to me, if I'm the owner, that's risk. If I'm the RM, that's risk. And so I'm just like, I mean, obviously restoration is risk mitigation, but it's like, to me, now I've got a totally different frame on the problem that you solve, because execution after an event sounds pretty commodity. Like, it's kind of like making cookies. Like, it's just like mix the flour, the sugar, the whatever, and boom, it happens. But it's the whole plan of what happens when the event happens, because you don't want, a fire drill. You want this to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Correct.
I got it.
Correct.
I totally got it. Awesome. This is super. This has been really, really good. I hope everyone's had a chance to listen. Dave, who should we listen to next? Who should talk to you next?
So I'm going to recommend Tammy Longo with ALN Data. I referenced that earlier. So if you haven't heard of ALN Data, it's a website. It's a software as a service where you can get contact information for every property across the entire country. The management company, the owner, you can see the construction status, if it's in planning, if it's in construction, you can see all that. They've got change reports, moved where, who left this job, or what property changed names. And when you have, if you're a restoration, you have an event and you need to get someone's contact information, that's the gold right there, right? Everybody, I need to call this person, what's their phone number, right? Or even if you're selling software or something that doesn't have a specific time wall, who do you know at this property? How do you get their contact information? One of the other cool things that they do is you can, like, with 1 or 2 clicks, run a really quick comparative market analysis. So I can really quickly pull a list of all of their nearby competitors and the contact information for them and start making my calls. So it takes a lot of the research time out of what someone who's selling the multifamily does. And Tammy is an awesome person. She's a great speaker. I've seen her at VAMA and TAA and Apartmentalize, and seen her on other podcasts. She was on Tip Talks Tech last week, and good friend of mine. So I think she's the one I'm going to recommend.
Outstanding. Tammy will be reaching out. Yeah, that's the recommendation there. Data aggregators fascinate me, so I'd love to have that conversation. Thanks everyone for listening. Of course, follow us the next LinkedIn Live. We've got one coming up I think later this week or maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday. I'm going to be at Arizona Mid Market. If you want to have a chat and grab me, also at SFR West. Are you going to any shows the rest of the year? Or are you done?
I'm done for the year. We're expecting our child, second baby, December 3rd. So at this point, I'm locked down in the house until I have the kid.
No, your wings are clipped.
Probably for 3 months
your
afterwards.
Wings are clipped.
Yep.
Yep, I would recommend that for this your collective sanity. Excellent. So come check me out if you want to go to those. Love to chat about this stuff. And thanks for the time, Dave. Really good, very good insight in terms of the problems that you solve in respect to getting to Hell Yes. And again, anybody follow the podcast on Apple or Spotify, and I look forward to seeing this one posted out there probably in about a week. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, Dave. Thank you for sharing everything from your background.
Please reach out to connect on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/David Holland CPM. And I'd love to talk. Should you want to do some disaster planning, I'm here for you.
Definitely. That's a good little plug. All right, perfect. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, and